Hi, my name's Ian Clough. I'm the chairman of the Brian Bell Group and a director of the Sir Brian Bell Foundation in Papua New Guinea. If you're wanting to learn how to embrace change and navigate through disruption as a leader, then listen to the Leadership is Changing podcast with my good friend Dennis Giannuzzo.
Welcome to Leadership is Changing. Each week, we and our guests provide information and insights through exploring leading change. This is taking your leadership to another level by finding the balance between executive excellence and personal well-being through stories that inspire real change. It's time to adapt in our fast-moving world when leadership is changing with your host, Dennis Giannuzzo.
Hey, welcome to the show, Leadership is Changing. What we as leaders know to be true is that change is constant. Leaders everywhere confront similar obstacles because people are people, but everywhere you go, leaders are overwhelmed, disrupted, and under pressure. They run from email to email, meeting to meeting. Many leaders are not changing quick enough, which means they run the risk of becoming irrelevant and being left behind. The purpose of the show is taking our listeners' leadership to another level by finding the balance between executive excellence and personal well-being through stories that inspire real change. I believe we don't have enough effective leaders in the world today, and if we can get the leaders to step up and lead change, then they can inspire real change. Hey listeners, it's now time to adapt in our fast-moving world, and I want to welcome you to today's episode. I have a wonderful guest here with me today. His name is Ian Clough, who was born in Papua New Guinea, where he spent his early life, and he's proud of his Papua New Guinea heritage. He studied in Australia before returning to a family business, and Ian began his life in retail with the Brian Bell Group, working during school holidays and more permanently after graduation. Working in roles within Kmart, Bunnings, Liquorland, Coles supermarkets, and Target, Ian's 25-year career with Wesfarmers provided significant development and opportunity. After forging a successful retail career in one of Australia's biggest companies, he returned to Papua New Guinea to add value to his family's business and to the Papua New Guinea community. As the chairman of one of Papua New Guinea's most reputable businesses, he also maintains a director role on the Sir Brian Bell Foundation, while also sitting on the Council of St. John, Papua New Guinea, and completing a term with the Port Moresby Chamber of Commerce. Ian is also the Honorary Consul for Sweden and Norway. Ian, a big welcome to the show to you.
Good morning, Dennis. It's great to be having an opportunity to chat to you.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you. I've told you, and we've just shared with the listeners a little bit about your background. Tell me more about your background, and in particular, tell me a little bit about the Brian Bell Group.
So I'll start with the easy stuff, which is right back to the start. As you said, I'm born in Papua New Guinea. I'm a Papua New Guinean citizen. I'm proud of my PNG heritage, and I enjoy being able to come back to Papua New Guinea to add value after working and setting up a life in Australia. The Brian Bell Group was started in 1958. It's a 63-year-old business that started as a little gun shop in a small suburb in Port Moresby called Ella Beach, and it's grown to be one of Papua New Guinea's most recognised business brands. Certainly not the biggest retailer in the country, but highly respected and regarded, and our team over the 63 years have done a wonderful job in building the reputation of the business, really focused on providing quality service and value. And I am fortunate to have two wonderful daughters, a beautiful wife. They live in Australia, and I work in PNG. So FaceTime and all the modern communications are how we go about life, and that's not uncommon for people that work abroad. And COVID certainly has made that a bit of a challenge for us. But no, I'm delighted to be back working in PNG and with the team here that are doing some amazing things to change the way our customers shop in our business and give back to the community in a really positive way. So it's a great environment to be in.
That's excellent. And I see, with the retail and so forth, especially with lockdowns and that being, we're relying a lot on supermarkets, of course, to actually provide us the food and everything we need to be able to survive as we stay at home for sure. So it's a really important aspect of our life at the moment too, along with what you just said around FaceTime and technology, helping us stay in touch with family and friends and loved ones around the world, especially when we can't go and visit them for sure. So it's real important stuff. Hey, Ian, how did you get into leadership?
Look, I think I was fortunate enough to be surrounded by leaders as a child. My grandfather started the business. My father was obviously involved in the business at a senior level. I was influenced by people running a business and leading teams of people from a very early age. I decided to go and forge my own identity and learn a little bit more about retail outside of the Papua New Guinea environment and moved to Australia. And I came from an environment where you were expected to work hard all the time. And for me, as an early person, I didn't have aspirations to be a leader as such, but over time, just as a result of having an expectation that I worked hard, I was provided with opportunities, fortunately, to take on more significant roles, and slowly that formed some, I guess, leadership credibility amongst the people that I was working with. And I had some really strong mentors over the time that provided me opportunity to then take on more and more. And all of a sudden, one minute you're stacking shelves or doing things that just need to be done, to suddenly responsible for and accountable for more significant parts of the business. So I'm fortunate that I'd argue that in some ways I was surrounded by it early, and that influenced me very quickly. And others, I think I've just been fortunate that I've had good mentors that have identified that maybe I had some leadership qualities that were valuable and helped to steer me to a place where I could use those.
Yeah. Okay, good. So you mentioned a couple of things I want to do a little bit of a deep dive on. One is around your own identity. Do you think developing your own leadership identity is important?
I absolutely do, Dennis. I think that if I just talk personally for a minute, I was born into a family that had a small business that was growing. It was recognised as a teenager. You want to be your own person and recognised for your own skills, etc. And I was working in an environment where everyone knew who I was because of my father and my grandfather. So, when you get to 19 and everywhere you go, someone says, "Oh, you're Sir Brian's grandson," or "You're Trevor's son." I decided that maybe it was time that I went and learned some things and set my own course, because it was important that I built my own, I guess, credibility or brand as such, and decided off I'd go and do my own thing. The expectation was for a short period of time. It turned out to be much longer than that. I always tell people that I was a very slow learner, but I think that your own credibility, your own style, your own, I'm going to call it brand, but that's very important, because when you talk about reputations, when you talk about integrity, authenticity is very important. And I think for me, it's really, really important that people identify what it is they stand for and work really hard to maintain that expectation of those people around them.
Yeah, that's good. Very good. So yeah, your brand, but there's so many things you've just covered off there, which is brilliant. The second area I wanted to do a little bit of a deep dive on, and which is you talked about having some strong mentors around you. How important is it for people to actually think about who are either wanting to get into leadership or are at a certain leadership level, but they want to go to more senior levels or to a larger scale? How important is it for them to have mentors, and what should they do to try and find a mentor?
Look, Dennis, I think it's critical. I think that no one is going to realise their potential without support. I know that there's plenty of examples where people have, but I think that if they reflect on their journey, there will always be people that have influenced them either directly or indirectly. And so I think that having some people around you that can provide you with some steer, some direction, some guidance, some honesty around the things that you need to be doing to go to the places that you want to from a leadership perspective is a critical part of your development. And I've been very fortunate along the way that while I might not have realised it at the time, that I had people that were invested in my success and or at least me doing well, whether it was to support them in their roles or just to see me be the best that I could be. I think that's really important. I think it's important that you have close contacts, whether they're inside the business or outside your work environment, that know you well, that provide you with, that steer. I credit a lot of things to a lot of people, but I also can't underestimate the patience and tolerance of my wife, who, knows me better than anyone and just belts me around the head every now and then when it's time to say, well, this is what you need to have a good hard look at. And those sorts of conversations are really important.
Yeah, I think the words that you used before about having, them being honest and having some honesty with you and having that honest conversation, and you called it a belt around the head a couple of times, but, I think at the end of the day, it's really what we talk about is that There are people who have got, as you said, vested interest in you. They've got your back, but they've got your back in a good way, in the sense that they want to look after you and make sure you succeed. And so having those honest conversations is going to be really important for sure. Excellent. Ian, you may have several here, but I'm going to ask you this question in the sense of, who is your favorite leader? Now, this person could be alive or from history, but who's your favorite leader and why?
I think that's a really tough question for me, Dennis, if I'm honest. I think about, when people ask me this question, who I would consider my favourite leader. I think that there's not one person that I say to me influences the things that I've learned from, or the environments that I've been in that I've taken the most from. I'd say I take lots of little pieces from the people that I see, or the people that influence me. I love seeing stuff on Nelson Mandela. I love reading about people like Abraham Lincoln, because they're, pioneers, or they've demonstrated amazing courage. I was a big, still am a big Barack Obama fan, because, you're talking about breaking down barriers, and, a guy who can inspire people with a conversation. For me, in terms of favourite leader, I've got some people that I've worked with that, really have influenced me over my journey. There's a gentleman that I work with in the Coles Wesfarmers world for a number of years, who, can only be described as firm but fair, and, genuinely invested in your success. And so, Mark was a very, very strong influence on my development as a leader. But I can't put it down to one person. I always look to people for, whether they have an authenticity, whether they can inspire people, whether they deliver messages that you take away and reflect on a regular basis because they're meaningful. And so it's a tough question to answer with just one person. So I think if I could wash up one leader alive or dead, it would be a person who embodies all of those qualities that are important to me: authenticity, honesty, integrity, inspiration. There are people that have probably got elements of all of that, and if you were taking those elements and making one person, I'm not sure they're out there, but maybe I haven't found them yet.
Yeah, no, that's good points. And I think the thing that I'm hearing that you talked about is that they've got messages that they have got to share with people. But if you take those messages and you reflect and you do something with it, then it's going to be a great thing. Whereby, for a lot of people, it's just be messages, and some people just don't do anything with it. But if we can take the messages, experiences, and reflect on what others have done and learn it and apply it to us and maybe our organization, that's a good thing to do. And who knows where it goes, for sure.
Yeah, I think, I've had conversations with people in the past who talk to me about, what do you stand for? You take over a new team and you sit down and you establish your ways of working, and, let me tell you a bit about how I like to work. Those conversations usually come in a big long list of sound bites almost, or sayings, or things that I'd probably use to describe what they mean to me and how I like to work. And, whether it's, a saying that, we all know about, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care, helps me to describe how important it is that, my awareness of their world, understanding of the things that are important to them, help me to shape how I want to interact with those individuals. And so, particularly in a Papua New Guinean context, we've got an environment where there's no shortage of need in PNG. There's an enormous amount of empathy required for Papua New Guineans and the challenges that they face in their everyday lives, that while we want to maintain high standards and we challenge all of our team to exceed our own expectations, there's still a moment where you have to have some genuine empathy and care around their situations. So little things like that help me to steer myself and bring you back on track when there's times where you have to make some decisions that you think, what's the right thing to be doing in this space? I think that helping to have these, signposts or things that keep you on the straight and narrow are really important.
Yeah, cool. Very good. Thanks for sharing that, Ian. It's got some good points here, listeners, for sure. So, Ian, about 4 years ago, I had a tumour removed from my left vocal cord. Here I was traveling the world, executive coaching, facilitating, doing really well. And I thought, my life's over and my job's over. Came back as being benign and had it removed 4 years ago. And it was really, really quite cool. But it sort of gave me a wake-up call to say, hey, time for you to now go and do what you really want to go and do, because you've been given a second chance in life. And when we went into lockdown a year ago, this is why I launched, the podcast, Leadership is Changing. And that's why, thinking about the voice journey, that's why I've decided to do it. So the show is called Leadership is Changing. And when I mention the title of the show, what does that mean to you, that leadership is changing? What does that mean for you?
I think as I think about leadership over time, and it is changing. It is changing. Let's be honest. In the last 18 months, the way you lead teams of people and the way you engage teams of people has changed dramatically, and it's changed more so for certain sectors in business or in leadership roles. I think there's two pieces for me. One is the people that you're obviously leading are changing. The expectations of individuals, the way they live their lives, I'm going to call it without trying to sound too delicate, but the passions and the priorities for some parts of the community are evolving. And so a leader who, particularly those who manage or lead large teams, has to have a really diverse toolkit to be able to engage with all of those different parts of the community. And so that's really important. And I think adaptability is critical in this environment, because the people that you're leading expect different things, the community's expecting different things. And again, in the last 18 months, priorities have changed dramatically. The second part of that for me is also what's happening in the way of the tools that you have available. I mean, whether it's tech has changed the way people lead. You're communicating on more channels than you've ever communicated before, because, people expect different things. The leadership is much more culture focused than it was before. I think you hear a lot of people talking about what culture means, and a lot of investment in cultural development for organisations. So I think the leaders of today need to be really focused on what culture they're trying to build and maintain within their work environment. So I think leadership in 2021, and I suspect in the years to come, is going to be even more challenging than it may have been 5 years ago, as we say.
Yep. So it certainly is changing for sure. And I think technology is making things go faster as well, but also it's enabling us to do business faster, but more of a bigger footprint, if I can put it that way. So, you talked about before earlier on, you're able to talk with the family, of course, with, FaceTime and things like that, and other people too. So I think it's really amazing to see where technology is taking things for sure. And for some people, it's very scary, right? I mean, it's scary in the sense that, wow, technology, like here in this country today, just go back about 2 months ago, I think it was, they stopped taking checks. They don't do checks anymore, banks and businesses and things like that. And for a lot of people who are writing checks out for a lot of their lives now have to become more digital, and they're like, whoa. And so the whole change is happening for them a lot, for sure. So, yeah. Hey, Ian, based on your businesses and the industry that you're in, how has your business or industry changed, and what demands does that put on you or your leadership team?
I think, we're in the retail business. We have a diverse portfolio of businesses. That means that from a leadership perspective, there's a lot of, adaptability, because one minute you're having a conversation about what's required in a traditional department store, the next minute it's about what property portfolio you're overseeing. So, generalist type leadership is probably called upon even more. And what I mean by that is, you can't necessarily always be an expert in everything, but it's even more critical that you need to surround yourself with good people that are experts in their fields to be able to steer your environment. I think if you think about the retail industry in recent years, it's very tech focused, it's very digital focused, and as an organisation, Papua New Guinea is a little bit further behind the rest of the world, and that's only because of the cost of data in PNG, and the access to data in PNG is a lot less. It's a lot less accessible than it is elsewhere in the world. So Papua New Guinea is a little bit further behind, but it will leapfrog probably 2 decades of innovation and development pretty soon, when that all comes up to global standards. And so having our business really focused on being able to manage in that digital world, being able to respond to the customer's expectations in that space, requires us to think a little bit differently about how we engage our customers. Papua New Guinea, for example, is one of the fastest adopters of Facebook per capita. And so, as Papua New Guineans get access to digital technology, they're on the Facebook apps and smartphones more so than ever before, and our business needs to be able to engage our customers and talk to our customers in that space more so than it ever did. 5 years ago, we didn't even have a Facebook page, and so now we're one of the largest Facebook pages in the country, and we have millions of interactions every month. So thinking about how we move away from traditional customer engagement is really important. So I think if you talk about our industry and how business is changing, I think being able to utilise these tools that have become available is really important. Being able to surround yourself with people that understand that, but more importantly, understand what it's going to become more so than what it is really important, because if you're using it now, it's probably outdated, and tomorrow's new best thing is just around the corner. So being able to be dynamic, fast-paced, and adaptable is critical to success.
Yeah, and technology is amazing how fast it's moving. As you said, you order something, it arrives, you implement it, it's out of date already. So it's really amazing how quickly it is working. Hey, if there was one thing you could change in business as a leader today, what would it be?
I think, Dennis, the thing that, the fast pace and the technology and everything else is doing that's really positive is that leaders can reach a wider audience really quickly. They can get a message to people really, really quickly. I think if I could change, though, one thing, I think for me it's that sometimes I'm a believer that you can slow down to go faster. And there's times where I think that we can't undervalue that face-to-face engagement with people around delivering change messages or managing difficult situations. And I often talk to people about how, you can't do this by email, you can't manage this by WhatsApp, you can't, there are things that still require human interaction. And I think I read somewhere that, 7% of communication is the words we use, and the rest is all, tones, affliction, etc. When you're communicating by many streams at the moment, you're only getting that 7% to people. And so for me, I think I'm still not a huge fan of the whole Zoom thing for meaningful conversations, but that's the world we're in right now. But I do think sitting down and having conversations with people where it really counts can't be undervalued. And I think that if there was one thing I could change, it was, the world allowing us to still have the time to be able to do that, to make meaningful connections either in the workplace or with our network.
Just imagine if you had shares in Zoom or in a supermarket right now, you'd be doing really well, right?
Yeah. I was reading about the gentleman who founded Zoom, and he was worth X, and then COVID hits, and now he's worth 10 times that, whatever. And I'm thinking to myself, that's a guy who sort of read the play early, and all of a sudden he's just in the right place at the right time. But it really highlights, how important this face-to-face contact is. I'm thinking about recruitment. We're an overseas company. We recruit, a handful of executives. We're looking for the best in the world. So that means that many of them aren't in Papua New Guinea. And to sit down and have a recruitment conversation on Zoom or similar is very different to sitting in a room with someone and, getting to know them and then getting to know you. Yeah, we can't underestimate how important that it is that we still maintain those meaningful connections.
Yeah, I think there's a saying out there that the higher the tech, the higher the touch. And so even though we've got technology today, we still need to have that high touch with people as well, for sure, which is really important. And talking about that, you've got employees, I've had employees, we've both probably been employees in the past and things like that. How are employees' expectations of leaders changed?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I think that in many cases it goes back to that conversation around how leadership's changing. I think our employee expectations are changing because the things that are priorities for many of our employees or employees across the world are changing. There's such a diversity of expectation that reflects whether it's the communities in which they live, or in the work environments in which they're operating. I think that the employee expectations are that, that leaders are much more accessible, and whether that's just direct contact via whatever channel or streams appropriate in that business. But I also think that leaders are expected to have, I guess, an awareness and understanding and an appreciation for all of the things that employees might be dealing with. And I think that the bigger your organisation, the more complex that can be. But I think of organisations like when I worked in Wesfarmers, that the more and more the communities evolved, the more diverse each community became, and ultimately how you had to think a little bit differently when you were dealing with change programs. And so things that worked in North Queensland certainly didn't work, even less so in Victoria, and things that worked in New South Wales and Sydney, you couldn't necessarily assume that they would be successful in Western Australia. So, and Papua New Guinea is a land of 1,000 tribes. People speak 800 languages. And so for us, the diversity in just our communities is so significant that it challenges our team to be able to be really aware of how we provide the right services and products, and from our employees' perspective, how we meet their expectations, because they are so different across the country. Small country, 8 million people, but 800 languages and such a diversity in terms of population that it really means that you have to work hard to meet your team's expectations, is probably the way I see it.
Can you speak all 800 languages?
I'm lucky I'm barely able to speak English, Dennis. People would argue, but no, I pride myself on knowing words in two others, but it's incredible. So you think about Papua New Guinea. There's a beautiful mountain over here, and the people that live there speak one language, and then as far as the crow flies, say it's 50 kilometres on the other side of the hill or the valley, there's another tribe, and they might speak a slightly different dialect. And it is an interesting environment. And Papua New Guinea's billed as the land of the unexpected, and there's no false advertising there at all.
And it's really amazing too. All of that without technology. I mean, it's just amazing, eh?
This is exactly right. So sometimes, the cynic in me every now and then starts to talk about whether technology is the secret to success, but I think it's a balance of both.
The land of the unexpected, is that what you said before? Yep. What does that mean? What's the meaning behind that?
I think when it was originally touted, Papua New Guinea, the land of the unexpected, was purely based on just that diversity message. You're talking about some of the most pristine, beautiful, untouched coastal regions in the world that would rival, if you could get to them, the Maldives, the Bora Boras that everyone knows about. And then you've got mountain regions that are just spectacular, that, where there's snow-capped mountains that no one would ever expect to see. I think there's something like 6% of the world's biodiversity is in Papua New Guinea, with something like 2.5%, might even be higher than that, percent being unique to the country. So you're talking about bird life and animal life and plants and things that are just nowhere else in the world. And I think the unexpected part comes because most people see Papua New Guinea from what they read on the news or what they hear about in the media, which for people who live here or people that are passionate about PNG, it's far from that. Papua New Guinea has lots of challenges, and we're a young country. While it's thousands of years in the making for the country, in essence, it's only been independent for 46 years. And so for us, we think about the journey that, say, in Australia or New Zealand was on after 46 years. It was probably not too dissimilar in terms of its learnings and stumblings and challenges. But Papua New Guinean people are genuinely very authentic and passionate and caring. And so, when they're supported and given the right tools, they're as successful as anyone.
Yeah, fantastic. That is fascinating in the way that you're sharing it and what's happening there too. And yeah, brilliant. I love it. The land of the unexpected. Nice. And especially in today's world, speaking about today's world and the fast-paced, ever-changing world, what makes a leader successful today in that kind of world?
Yeah, I think we've touched on it earlier. I think adaptability is a critical skill. I mean, one minute you're having conversations with people via Zoom. The next minute you're having face-to-face conversations. You're interacting with different people in WhatsApp groups on your phone. So being able to adapt to the various changes and the technology and the tools. And the expectations, as we said, are really critical. I think being responsive is important. There's no shortage of stimulus and no shortage of contact. We talked about emails earlier, and any leader in any sort of business is getting plenty of attention when it comes to tools and contacts. But I think being able to respond and listen and provide feedback within a reasonable time frame is important. People have an expectations of your time, and it's a fast-paced world, and so being able to manage multiple tasks, from face-to-face meetings to travelling to see regions, they're all encompassing, and you just need to be adaptable, responsive, continue to be authentic, and take your time to have meaningful contacts, because there's no shortage of them, and you can never underestimate that. One quick response to someone that's not well thought through can have a long-lasting effect on what they're doing and their world that you can't underestimate. So I think all of those things are really important at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. That's huge. That's big, because be careful what we're saying, how we say it, what we do, because the impact is massive. And we may not know, but you may have, as a leader, may have someone come to you 2 or 3, 5 years later going, remember the thing that you said, and this is what I went and did. It was like, oh, most leaders don't even remember what they've said or what they've done. So it's actually really interesting.
Yeah, I think so. I think, look, don't underestimate. We're all human and we're not perfect, and we all have those times where we might say something in error or short and sweeten back and all of those sorts of things. But I think you're right, and don't underestimate the impact you can have on that individual, particularly someone who's not used to interacting with you and not interacting with the way you like to work. And often, I've had responses from leaders in the past that I've thought that's not as well thought through as it could have been, or I would rather them have taken a bit more time to get me a quality response, because it does have a lasting effect. It might be confusing for an individual to, what is it that you want to be doing? So you've got a productivity challenge, you damage that relationship if they think you're less than caring. So I think that while we move at pace and we all want to get things done properly and quickly, we can't underestimate that if we do that without some consideration, it can have long-lasting effects that we might underestimate.
Absolutely. So, Ian, I'm going to get you to get your crystal ball out here and start thinking about the future. Where do you see leadership being in 5 years?
I think, Dennis, if you'd asked me this question 18 months ago, I can imagine the answer would have been very, very different. There was a time where I thought that we would be channeling on a similar place. I would never have thought that video conferencing and Zooming and all this sort of activity would be anything of what it is today, when, like we said earlier, Mr. Zoom, who invented the whole tech or created his platform, would never have expected to be what it is. I think if I look forward and go, what is the world going to look like from a leadership perspective? I think that it's going to be more of the same in terms of that multiple channel engagement. It's going to be more of the same in terms of the fast-paced nature of leadership. But I think what's going to happen is that the expectations of the people that we're leading are going to continue to get higher and higher. And I think that when I reflect on the changes in the world in the last 18 months, that people now have an expectation of, that direct contact, that specific, the thing that leaders are struggling with, particularly in the political arena at the moment, is ambiguity and uncertainty and, defining what the future might look like. So I think the more that leaders can provide the people that they're leading with some certainty, some clarity, some real direction is going to be even more important than it is today. I think that, as I said earlier, that our communities and the people we're leading are going to have higher expectations. What is it about? What are you doing for me? How is that helping me? How is that helping the things that I believe in? And you just have to look at some of the messaging around sustainability and the environment and et cetera, that leaders have had to shift strategically how they feel about those things and what their businesses are doing to protect those things to meet the expectations of communities. I mean, boards have expectations around diversity, around what businesses are doing to protect the environment, what they're doing to protect the workforce. We're talking about child employment policies and ethical sourcing. All of these things are going to just be amplified, I think, in my view, and leaders are going to have to be really, really clear about what they stand for in those areas.
Yeah, too right. Amplified and understand what you stand for. Really interesting topics and thoughts as well. Ian, thank you for joining us on today's show. Hey, if our listeners are wanting to get hold of you, where should they go?
I'm a LinkedIn user, Dennis. I'm certainly not an avid one, as active as some of my colleagues, but that's probably the best place to reach out and make some contact. I like interacting with people from time to time on LinkedIn, so please look me up on LinkedIn and shoot me a message if there's something that you think that I could share or provide some insight into. I'm more than happy to liaise through that platform. It seems to be a good one from a business perspective.
Great. Ian, once again, thank you so much for being on the show. We thoroughly enjoyed our conversation today.
I appreciate the discussion. Thanks, Dennis. Great to talk to you.
Thank you. Hey, listeners, what we as leaders know to be true is that change is constant. Change is incredibly scary, especially with the unknown and unfamiliar territory. It's time to adapt in our fast-moving world when leadership is changing. Hey, look out for the episodes as they've been released. Download them, have a listen, put a review and a rating. Feel free to share them with your friends and your family and your network. And if there's any feedback you'd like to give me about the show, or a question for my guests as I interview them, or a question for the Ask Dennis Freestyle episode, send me an email, dennis@leadingchangepartners.com. Hey, listeners, if you haven't already checked out the Facebook group or the LinkedIn page, which is Leadership is Changing, go ahead and join us on those two platforms. We would love to see you there. Listeners, thanks for tuning in. Until next time, bye for now.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Leadership is Changing with your host, Dennis Giannoutsas. Each week, we and our guests provide information and insights through exploring leading change, inspiring executives and leaders to adapt and lead a bigger game in a fast-moving world.